Hello everyone. We have a rapid game submission by one of our viewers, Ryan KF, rated 1887, so very strong player from the black side against Buff Bunny 1800 from the white side. Let's see what happens. Let's go through the game. So white opens with c4, some type of English, and rather than trying to just say, oh, this is a better move, or you know what I mean? Like the engine can do that. So we're going to look at maybe like a chess chunk or some way to maybe help black think differently in a specific position as opposed to just calling out a move, which doesn't help anyone. So anyway, white keeps developing towards the center. Black opens up his bishop. And now here's the first moment when black has to make a decision. He sees that white did this weird pawn structure, which immediately creates holes on these squares, as pawns can never protect these squares, right? And so black, really has two moves here in my mind, which are, of course, central moves that attack the center, d5 and c5. I kind of like c5 because it threatens to play on this square permanently because it's an outpost, and white, even though he's ganging up on this square, it's not like we played e5, right? And therefore we have this square and he has this square. He doesn't actually have this square for his pieces. So I kind of want to play my pawn here and play on this square and say, well, you don't actually ever get to play on this square. But, so both of these moves are fine. So Ryan chooses d5, which breaks on the square that's defended the most. So this immediately just tries to blow up white's center as opposed to c5, which would play around the weakness. So, they're both excellent moves, but stylistically, I'm more of a c5 guy. But this isn't something to fix, this is a great move. So we just see a trade of pawns in the center. And now white pushes. Okay, black retreats the knight and hits the pawn, which is of course going to be defended. I would consider, or I would calculate in the 30-minute game anyway, moving forward with the knight as well as pushing the pawn. If I determine that those don't work, or I don't like the resulting position, then and only then would you consider knight d7. But if you automatically move knight d7, then I think that's an error in your thought process. I think it's only fine if you considered these two moves first. Okay, so let's continue. White defends the pawn. And black moves his knight here, defending. My instinct in a position like this is c5, immediately breaking down this center that white's trying to hold on to gain, because he has more space with it. I can see why you might not want to do this, like in your head, because you think, oh, if he takes, my pawn is hanging, so maybe you think you're losing a pawn. But I would still do it, even if it does lose a pawn. I don't know if it does. You have to, like, it's all move by move when you make a move like c5. But something about it tells me there's no way it doesn't equalize immediately, because he can't put a pawn here and maintain it, right? So it's going to get destroyed one way or another, whether you take or whether he tries to win a pawn. Both of these are hanging. Yeah, your pawn's hanging, but I feel like you're going to have amazing development, at least compensation for the pawn. It's going to be hard to be worse, and he will no longer have a center. So I don't know. Attack the pawn. Maybe he'll take the pawn with one of the pieces. Then you develop and take another pawn. And okay, he's up a pawn for the moment, but this pawn is overextended. Your pieces are looking good. Everything's on the back rank. You have great development. And I would probably rather be black here, but so that's my instinct, is to go c5 and just immediately destroy the center. Okay, so black goes knight b6, which looks a little weird to me because, like, what if he just kicks you? And also, like, even if he doesn't, I don't know, it's just a weird spot for the knight, but I guess, I mean, you can't leave it here blocking your pieces, so you do have to move it, so it does make sense. I just like c5 a little more, so we go on. Okay, so now white tries to even cement his center further. Another reason why c5 last move would have been really nice, because it would have destroyed this concept. And black goes bishop e6, trying to solidify his center. Now I get what you're doing, and in a different position I might like this move, but in this position I think the concept is a little too passive. I get you're trying to solidify this pawn, but this pawn is not under, it's not in any danger. He can only ever add pressure with these two pieces. It's already defended twice. You can easily defend it a third time, but he can't even attack it a third time, so you don't have to. And this bishop really does not belong here. I think bishop f5 makes a lot more sense. Maybe you were worried about like g4. Um, hmm. Oh, but then queen h4, that doesn't work. He can't go g4. So what were you worried about? I don't know. I think you were just trying to solidify the center, but I feel like bishop f5 is just a more active move, slicing through the position. And another reason I don't like your move is because of this pawn is here. So even if your bishop's here, he might play a move like bishop here. And okay, you can get the trade in if you want. Um, but if, like, even if you go where you went, he's still going to go here. The only difference now is instead of trading your bishop, he's threatening f5. So it's just a worse scenario for you. And I don't like your bishop here because it's asking to walk into a future f5. I don't know, just a weird move. Not my favorite. Okay, he develops the knight here, and black goes h6, trying to, I guess, stop the harassment of this bishop. Similar to your bishop move, I think in a different position, slightly different position, I might like a move like this, but in this position, I think it's the wrong thinking for two reasons. And I think this is a good chunk where you can take something from that's not move by move, and you can apply it to all your future games. The first thing is you're stopping a move which you should want him to make. Why would you want him to make that? Well, let's say instead of that you did, I don't know, develop c5. But let's just keep it simple and say you just develop. Then he goes here. And then you make another normal move. I don't know. Let's just say bishop out. I'm not making the best moves. I'm just showing you something. And he takes this bishop, which you were trying to prevent. You can recapture, and now you have a stable pawn center, a pawn defended by a pawn, and this pawn helps prevent f5, and it controls the light squares better than the bishop, because you're going to be able to play g6 and just put a halt to his idea, which is to push f5, because he doesn't have any ideas of pawn breaking on the c file because there's no pawn. So he has to play for f5, so you want to set up your pawns against that idea. So you're not afraid of him taking this bishop for the knight. You don't care. But even more important than that is that when you play h6, you're weakening your light squares, and you need to be strengthening your light squares because of how weak they are in general. You're missing this e pawn, so that's already weakening your light squares. And then he's going to play for f5, which is on the light squares. So you want to bolster that. So instead of playing h6, you want to be playing g6. And oh wait, yeah, g6 or whatever. And even though it may look weakening on the dark squares, you're not afraid of the dark squares because you're not weak there. you're weak on the light squares, and he's not going to break on the dark squares. He's breaking light. So his plan is to go here. He has to try to set that up, and you're just preventing it. And a good thing to know is in these structures, make believe this bishop is a pawn. In these structures, a lot of times white will try to reinforce the f5 push, and so you adopt a pawn setup that looks like these three, this one, and then you even play h5, preventing the g4, so that he can never get in f5, and then you generally plant a knight here or a bishop here, and you're blockading as well as controlling the light squares. And even though you have some dark square holes, it's not anything that ever matters or that he can use because of the construction. He can't get in. He can't hop over his own stuff. And you have a dark square bishop. You're just not weak there. So the idea you're going for is g6, not h6. So anyway, h6 comes, and your opponent, okay, gives you another turn. That was very considerate. And here's c5 comes. I do like the idea. I definitely like the idea. Let's play c5. Let's break this down. I would have felt more comfortable if g6 was in instead of h6, but that's not the position. Okay, so black lifts up his queen in preparation of stopping f5 because white just developed his bishop in order to play f5. But again, you're trying to control it with pieces, and he'll just keep adding more force until he can eventually play it. Like, you're stopping it now, but at the end of the day, he's going to castle. He's going to have a rook. That's another guy. You don't have another light square bishop to control this square. At some point, you're going to need to play g6. But now when you play it, it's even worse and more weakening than it would otherwise be because you played h6. You know, this pawn isn't supporting light, so it's a little weirder to play g6 now, but you're still going to need to do it. That's how you stop this idea. You can't do it with pieces because after castles and also h3 g4, he's going to get it in whether you like it or not. So this queen move is like a temporary band-aid. So white castles again, maybe threatening to just play f5 now, and if you take, you're walking directly into a rook discovery. Who knows, what he has in store. So I'd already be very worried about f5 and I would rush with g6 because conceptually that's how you stop the pawn break. And when they play f4, they're going for f5, but that pawn on f4 also blocks their bishop, meaning the dark squares he can't get to. So you're even more likely to play g6 because he can't even access the weak dark squares that you're creating, right? So this is all really good to know because in a lot of passive openings, caro-kann, Peards, whatever, they pawn storm you with f Sicilian. Even when they play on opposite sides, they pawn storm you with f5, and a lot of times the answer is to play g6 and h5 like a caro-kann style setup, or g6 and f5, just completely stopping it. So these are really good defensive ideas to know. Okay, so you don't care about, not you don't care, you probably think it hangs a pawn, so it's not scary, but it's very scary. So you just develop which would otherwise be a good move if he didn't have f5. Okay, he doesn't play it, so you're off the hook for a second. And okay, now he's threatening your c pawn, so you push for free, so he has to move. He's still threatening f5. So you solve it this way, blockading the square instead of playing g6. I mean, this works kind of, but the problem here is you don't have an e pawn, and the queen is not a stable piece. The queen is the least stable of all of the pieces because it's worth the most, which means you always have to run with it. So eventually, after this trade, your queen will be kicked out of this square, whether it's with a pawn, a knight, something's going to bully it away. And when the queen does move, and he does get f5 in, he's going to have the f and e pawn steamrolling because you don't have an e pawn blocking it. And so although this looks like it stops f5, in the long run, it doesn't. That's why you need the pawn there. So it's really important to do g6 type stuff. And I've lost so many games like this until I've messed around enough with the engine to see the setups and stuff. So anyway, white doesn't take and try to push through f5 and e6, which would be what I would look for. Instead, he tries to break down this pawn, which wasn't really going anywhere, right? Like, but whatever. Okay, so now he's really letting you off the hook. So now you take the bishops. He has to recapture. And, okay. Your position's a little better. This is still a thing. And so, I mean, I still want to play g6 because what else do you do in this position? I don't see how to stop it. That's the thing. I mean, okay, you throw in the pawn push and deflect his queen to the wrong side of the board and then do g6. That, I mean, but you still have to play g6, right? Okay, so you castle, and that's asking for f5 e6 trouble. And you should definitely see f5 e6. That's not, you know, like a hard thing to see. Like if you were white, that's what you would do next, right? So I have no idea how castling is supposed to fit in with this idea. If anything, it looks like your king is in more danger. You also don't have a knight protecting your king. No, this looks dangerous. Maybe you have to play around it. I mean, it might be terrible though. Anyway, let's see. Okay, so now he finally pushes f5, which is the right idea. And you throw in this because it's forcing and it deflects the queen probably, so this makes sense. It also opens up the c file, so there's lots of good things about that move. But most of all, it's forcing. That's most important. And then you improve a knight for free. I get it. I like it because, I mean, I say the words improve a knight for free, and it sounds great. But it still doesn't address this, though. So if he can make a move, I don't know. It also undefends the center. You also have this knight, which hasn't moved. I'm still worried about this. I honestly don't know how to resolve it, though. I don't know what move I would play. I guess you have no choice but to take this pawn and pray. But I mean, the center's hanging and you have to calculate that move by move. But if you don't take this pawn and calculate move by move, he's going to push one of these pawns, and I just don't see how you don't lose the game. Okay, but maybe I'm just being dramatic. Okay, so he hops the knight in, which looks good, but maybe concretely fails. Okay, so he brings the bishop back out of harm's way, disconnects the rooks, which is a little weird, but it's good enough. It's, you know, it's still, he can sack it at any moment, which is another reason I don't like this pawn here, because you have no defenders around the king, and if I was him, I would be looking at taking this, playing something like f6. Your bishop has to, I don't know, go somewhere, and then maybe swing the queen across for some type of checkmate, or the rook. I don't know. But that's what I would be thinking if I was him. And now you bring out a knight. This is the right idea, only because at this point, like g6 isn't a thing, right? He plays f6 or worse, takes your pawn, or who knows which one's worse. So now I don't even know what to do. The only pawn move to even look at is f6, but after he pushes past, you have these super ugly holes. He's got this connected past pawn, so it's super ugly. So I don't know how to resolve this. That's why I'm saying take and calculate move by move, because I don't know what else to do. But okay, so you bring the knight out, which, I mean, makes the most sense. You just bring out another piece. What else can you do? But white doesn't strike, and I feel like he can. Can he not just play this? f6, bishop can't take. If you take with the pawn, you immediately hang this and you just lose the game. So yeah, you're lucky he didn't play f6. he's trying to prepare something that doesn't need preparation, and he's also trying to play g5, which doesn't make sense because you're just going to trade pawns. You need to play f6 or e6. But anyway, what? Okay, so you're... Does this work? You get a pawn, he gets a piece, you get a pin. He protects the piece. Does this work? I don't think this works. Does it work? Okay, so he calls your bluff and you pin the knight. He defends the knight, so it's defended properly, and you can add an attacker. So you take the hanging pawn that became undefended. Okay. So at least so far you got a couple pawns, which is nice. Breaking up his center, and now he no longer has those moves that he would have had. I mean, he can still kind of play f6, but it's even stronger, obviously, with the pawn here. Okay, so he swings the queen over. I thought the whole point of pushing this pawn was to play g5, but then he didn't play it. Okay, but he brings the queen over first. And I mean, queen a4 does add pressure, but I think I would look at this move and go, okay, does this work move by move? Like, can he defend it? And he can obviously defend the knight many, many times. So if I come to the conclusion I'm not going to be able to win the knight, then I don't know if I want to abandon my king, right? I'm going away from my king. And my king doesn't have much around it. So if this works, I'm definitely doing it. But if I don't think it works, then my queen is just going to be stuck on a5 with nowhere to go and no reason to be here. So that might be an error in thinking, but you're trying to get activity. And it's like, if you don't do that move, what do? Well, I would leave my queen a little closer to the king and maybe develop a new piece. All right. If you want to add pressure to this knight, you can also do it with the knight c6, maybe. But I wouldn't retreat my knight. I would bring in the rooks because you need to get them in the game. So I think you need to finish development as it's move 22. But anyway, you do this, which does put pressure. And, I mean, he does have to defend accurately, so it does make sense. But, I mean, the most obvious move that he's going to make is the correct one. And that's the most natural move. You're going to connect your rooks, block with the bishop, so the pin is off. And now that the pin is off, he can move his knight, right? And so now your stuff's really the stuff that's hanging. So that's why this was a little weird. Okay, you improve the knight and hit the bishop. So you're still trying to create problems for him. And then he sees this, which is crazy, considering he missed all of the pawn pushes earlier. He now sacks the bishop, which is a good idea, which is what I was talking about earlier. Because if you take, you're toast. Because queen takes, and then Lolly's mate to follow. Oh wait, is this the game? Oh yeah, you took. Oh no. Okay, so here's an error in thinking. You don't even really have to look at move by move. I mean, it helps if you know that the construction of Lolly's mate, all he needs to do is this. Then you kind of automatically sense this and don't do it. He just took a pawn, but just let him have the pawn and go do something else. Why? Because if you take, and he takes with the queen, I mean, how do you stop mate in 2? So what happened? Oh, why didn't white take with the queen? The most natural move. Okay, so this is just a random thing. Okay, generally it does not matter, I guess, which move order you do. I mean, it's definitely more natural to take with the queen, recapture, get it close to the king, and then push the pawn. For some reason, he did the other one first, which would sometimes allow your opponent more resources. In this case, there is some weirdness, which doesn't exist like normally. this check, which then, for example, if I go here and he takes the pawn, I give this weird check, taking the queen, trading the queens, and there's no checkmate, and that's just a ridiculous thing that happens to exist here. Generally, the move order is fine from white, but the main thing you want to know as black is this should look too dangerous, and this whole time you should have been fearing for many, many moves, not just here. F6, and if you weren't fearing that, that's something else you can learn and work on, is the sense of danger from a move like that, and that will help you play the position. Okay, so he's trying to checkmate you, and now you bring in your knight, maybe to just stop mate or something. Oh, okay, this is a different way. You take the knight with check, free piece, and then you take the pawn, ruining the construction. But this, I mean, if it works move by move... Oh wait, you got out of it a different way. Okay, so this was... Does this work? He takes with the rook. Is this your idea? And then still, does this work? Because if you take the knight, you're getting mated. Like that. So you found all these accurate moves. Take the knight, give the check, give up your bishop, and then you also found knight e8, giving this protector, so any of those mating patterns I just showed you can block with the knight. And material is you're up a pawn, and with your knight on e8 there is no mate. So he throws the check, of course you block, and now you've successfully consolidated. The only thing he can possibly do is try to get his knight here. So I guess you still have to be careful. So you double, pinning the knight. And he comes closer to the knight, which looks like it's defending everything, but it's an illusion because you still can't move the knight because the rook hangs, and you still can't move the rook because the knight hangs. And now all of that comes with check. So it's just the complete opposite effect of which you were expecting, which is very counterintuitive. But okay, so now we're lifting the rook up, trying to get active and trying to mess up his construction for the mate, which I like. And then queen trade to try to alleviate our problems, up a pawn. Okay, there's a minute on the clock, and so it's a very practical decision. But I just want to also state that when white was trying to mate you, he had all the pressure, and you were the one who had to really figure things out. Now that you kicked his queen away from here, he really no longer has any pressure. Your king is actually safe, and his king's the one that's a little more exposed than it should be. And in this position with this battery, you're the one who actually has some pressure. So having said that, you could choose not to trade queens, but trading queens is also safe and practical. I just wanted to add that you might be the one who has pressure in this position if you wanted to play on. But with a minute on the clock, I'm also definitely trading. Doubling up, that's exactly what I'm doing. A nice improving move that also defends, that works. Yep. Then you try to get your knight in, makes a lot of sense. It does disconnect the rooks, which breaks the pin, so I guess maybe he can move the knight for a second, but either way, it's fine. Keep improving the knight while maintaining a solid position. Improving the knight for free. Also blocking our rooks, but still it's a nice knight. And now offering some trades. I guess with just a minute on your clock, this makes sense. There's one trade. And if he attacks your stuff, I don't really like the construction of these pieces, the way they're lined up, but it's not like a losing thing. It's just, I'm up a pawn, I want to try to win as black. But now he attacks my stuff, and you give up this pawn because, I mean, I guess you didn't see rook e4, but either way, it's very drawish. Okay, he doesn't take the pawn, which is super weird because now you can push it. Why would he do that? Okay, so you push it, which is the right mindset. And now he's going for this check, which only... It's a bad move because it improves your king, which is what you want. You wish you had extra turns to bring your king in. Now you do. You keep continuing. He's forcing you to improve your position. All to go for this pawn. A little dubious. Oh, and you ignore it and push past because of this. Okay. And if he takes your pawn, you definitely need a response for that. So hopefully you you considered that. I guess you were gonna go check. And maybe you were gonna take or jump your knight. I don't know what your plan was, but I still like the thinking process. And now you push the pawn. You push it too, which could potentially overload the rook, but it's fine. Now he gives you a check, and it's like, this is his win condition, so you don't want him to be able to use it. So don't neglect it. So you move your king. Oops. So you move your king to the side because you want to protect this pawn from the knight. He gives you another check, and now he's helping you hit his knight. But your king is further away from this pawn, which scares me a little. But your knight has everything under control. What? Oh, he's taking a pawn. Okay, so he thinks he's winning a pawn and getting the knight out of trouble. But there's got to be maybe check. King here. Knight here, check. King somewhere. D2. Okay, so maybe he just didn't calculate the pawn push or the potential possibilities. Yeah, so you do give this check. But if you don't have the sequence of moves, then his move probably wins the game for him with this win condition over here. But considering you do have a response, he's shit out of luck. So you give a check. Oh, wait, he didn't go here and attack your rook, trying to deny d2, complicating matters. So he lets you play d2 immediately. And then, of course, this just... He takes, you get a queen, he gets a queen. No, this comes with check. Or he could do it this way, but he'll be down a ton of material. So he gets a queen, you get a queen. Okay, so this is kind of crazy. And conceptually, obviously trading queens is what you should look for, or forcing moves on his king. A forced queen trade or forced moves on his king. He goes first though, which is the annoying part. He's going to give you a bunch of checks. But next to the knight is probably the safest place for the king. I mean, it happens to be here, but if you don't know that, now you know, just run towards your knight. Okay, let's just see. He gives a bunch of checks. And then he's out of checks, which means he's going to lose the game. Because now you get the turn, and then you can give endless checks. Here's the queen trade. You have the right mindset. Nothing else to talk about. The rest is checkmate. I guess the takeaways would be... I'm not saying to do it, but consider the possibility of a c5 pawn structure where you don't play d5. You know, like c5, d6, something like that. Just another option. Then you can try to plant a knight here, but it's a different game. So just something to think about. And then I guess the next real big takeaway is when they have stuff like this, even if you have a pawn on e6, which you usually do have in most of these types of positions, even there, and even when you don't have it, you're still looking to solidify with g6. And you're not worried about the dark squares. So that's good to know, and I think that would have changed the game And once you put your pawn on g6 and got any of your minor pieces to f5, you play h5 to solidify that minor piece, and that structure is generally impenetrable. In this case, the only way for him to break through would be for an e6 pawn push, but for most of the time, that's going to be in your favor. If it's ever not, you can prepare for it. So that's all I would say. I know that was a lot. Sorry it takes so long, but hopefully this helps get you some chess chunks. Good luck in your chess. Submit your rapid games in Discord. Goodbye.